Lorenzo Moretti discovered the first theft on a Tuesday morning when his accountant called with a tremor in his voice that meant someone was about to die. "Mr. Moretti, we have a problem. The Castellano files are missing from the secure server." Lorenzo had been drinking his espresso in the breakfast room of his Lake Forest estate, reading the Tribune while his 9-year-old daughter Isabella ate her cereal across from him, her purple hair ribbon perfectly tied, her school uniform pristine. She'd been humming something, a song from that movie she liked, the one with the princess and the ice castle. His wife had died 3 years ago, and these morning routines with his daughter were the only moments of his day that didn't involve calculated violence or strategic cruelty. "What do you mean, missing?" Lorenzo kept his voice calm, controlled. Isabella didn't need to hear her father conduct business. She didn't need to know what the Castellano files contained. Evidence of every illegal transaction, every bribe, every body buried by the Castellano family over 20 years. Files that made them vulnerable. Files worth killing for. Deleted from a server.
No trace.
Like they were never there. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Lorenzo ended the call, his mind already racing through possibilities. Who had access? Who was smart enough? Who was suicidal enough to steal from him? "Daddy, you have that face." Isabella looked up from her cereal, her dark eyes, so much like her mother's, studying him with unnerving perception. The one that means someone did something bad and you're going to fix it. "It's nothing, princess." He stood, kissing the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Just business. Marco will drive you to school today. I have to go to the office early." "Okay." She went back to her cereal, humming again, and Lorenzo left, already calling his brother Marco to assemble their most trusted people. What Lorenzo didn't see was Isabella watching him leave through the window, her expression shifting from innocent child to something calculating, ancient beyond her years. She pulled out a small notebook from her backpack and made a neat checkmark next to Castellano Files, Week 1. 6 items down. 42 to go. If you're hooked on this story about a 9-year-old who's been outsmarting Chicago's most dangerous man, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a comment telling me if you think a child can be smarter than a mafia boss, and smash that like button because this story is about to show you exactly how far intelligence and patience can take you when everyone underestimates you. Trust me, you don't want to miss how this brilliant little girl has been playing a game nobody knew existed. 6 months earlier, Isabella had been sitting in her father's home office, the one place she wasn't supposed to be, reading a book about cryptography she'd borrowed from the public library under a fake name. She was 8.5, small for her age, with dark hair that fell in waves and a collection of purple ribbons she wore religiously because her mother had loved purple. Everyone thought she was reading fairy tales. She let them think that.
It was easier that way.
The office door had been ajar, and she'd heard her father talking to her older brother Marco Jr., who everyone called Junior. He was 16, being groomed to take over the family business, learning about territory and respect and how to command fear. Their father's voice had carried clearly. "You're my heir, Junior. Everything I've built, everything I've protected, it's yours when I'm gone. Isabella is precious, but she's delicate. She needs to be protected from this world, kept innocent. She'll marry well someday, into a family that can benefit us. But you're my legacy." Isabella had sat very still behind the door, the cryptography book forgotten in her lap. Delicate. Innocent. Something to be married off for political advantage. She'd been hacking her father's computer since she was 7, teaching herself code from YouTube videos watched late at night when everyone thought she was asleep. She'd been listening through the air vents to business meetings for a year, memorizing names and operations and weaknesses. She'd been watching, learning, understanding that her father's world wasn't actually complicated. It was just chess with bullets instead of bishops. And in that moment, hearing herself dismissed as decorative, she'd made a decision. She'd prove she was smarter than all of them. Not by asking for permission or begging for attention. By demonstrating it so completely, so undeniably, that even her father would have to acknowledge what she was capable of. She'd gone to her room that night and started planning. Not a heist. A campaign. The thefts had started small. Digital files copied from her father's personal server, the one he thought was secure because it required biometric authentication and a 12-digit password that changed weekly. Isabella had installed a keylogger on his computer 3 months prior. She'd filmed his fingerprint on a wine glass using her iPad and printed it on gelatin using a method she'd found in a hacker forum. The biometric scanner had accepted it on the second try. She'd been methodical. 1 file every 2 weeks. Important files, but not critical enough to cause immediate panic. The Castellano evidence. Offshore account information for 3 rival families. Blackmail material on a federal judge. A complete list of every police officer on her father's payroll. She'd stored everything on an encrypted external drive she kept hidden inside a teddy bear that sat on her bed. The same bear everyone assumed was her comfort object, the one she'd had since her mother died. Nobody looked twice at a little girl's stuffed animal. The key to not getting caught, she'd learned, was understanding human psychology. Her father's security was excellent against external threats. But internal security was lax because Lorenzo Moretti couldn't conceive of betrayal from within his inner circle. And he especially couldn't conceive of a threat from his own 9-year-old daughter, who he kissed goodnight and whose homework he checked and who he saw as something precious to protect, not something dangerous to fear. After the Castellano files disappeared, Lorenzo had launched a full investigation. He'd brought in his most trusted lieutenant, a man named Vito who'd been with him for 20 years, and they'd interviewed every person with access to the secure systems. 16 people. Background checks, lie detectors, surveillance of their personal lives. Isabella had watched it all unfold from the breakfast table, the dinner table, through air vents while her father conducted meetings in his home office. She'd listened to him rage about traitors and moles and people who'd betrayed his trust. She'd watched him become paranoid, suspicious of his own soldiers. And she'd stolen 3 more files while he was distracted by the investigation. The offshore account information. The judge's blackmail material. The police payroll list. Each theft was executed with surgical precision. She'd learned her father's patterns, when he'd be in meetings, when he'd be distracted by business in the city, when the house would be emptiest. She'd learned which security cameras had blind spots, which staff members were most oblivious, which times of day her brother Junior would be out with friends instead of being the watchful heir apparent. She'd also learned something else. She was good at this. Not just competent, genuinely talented. The planning, the execution, the way she could anticipate reactions and adjust her strategy accordingly, it came naturally to her in a way that math class and spelling tests never had. Sometimes late at night, when she was in bed supposedly sleeping, she'd wonder if this made her a bad person. If there was something wrong with her that she could steal from her own father, manipulate situations, think 3 steps ahead of adults who'd been doing this for decades. But then she'd remember. Delicate. Innocent. Something to be married off. And she'd pull out her notebook and plan the next move. 3 months into her campaign, Lorenzo had increased security. New protocols, new passwords, new biometric scanners that required both fingerprint and retinal scans. He'd installed additional cameras, hired a cybersecurity firm to audit his systems, and moved his most sensitive files to a physical safe in his private office. Isabella had watched these changes with interest. They were good defensive moves. They would have stopped 99% of threats. But she wasn't 99% of threats. She was the 1% who lived in his house, who he trusted completely, who had access to spaces and moments that external enemies could never reach. The safe was the challenge. Biometric lock, 18-digit combination, and a physical key that her father kept on his person at all times. It should have been impossible. She'd solved it in 3 weeks. The biometric lock used the same fingerprint scanner technology as his computer, so her gelatin print worked. The 18-digit combination changed monthly, but she'd installed a microscopic camera in the bookshelf across from the safe, angled to capture his hands when he entered the code. She'd spent 2 weeks studying the footage, mapping out the combination from his finger movements. The physical key had been the real problem. Lorenzo wore it on a chain around his neck, never took it off except when he showered. But he showered every morning at 6:30, like clockwork. And for exactly 15 minutes, that key sat on his bathroom counter. Isabella had practiced. She'd learned to move silently, had memorized the creaks in the floorboards between her room and her father's bedroom, had timed her movement to coincide with the sound of the shower running. She'd been able to access the key 3 times before she'd finally gotten a clear impression of it in the modeling clay she'd borrowed from art class. She'd ordered a blank key online, had it shipped to a P.O. box she'd set up using a fake ID she'd created. She'd cut the key herself using a Dremel tool she'd bought with money saved from her allowance, working in the gardening shed at 2 in the morning while everyone slept. The safe had opened on her first try. Inside, she'd found exactly what she'd expected. The crown jewels of her father's intelligence operation. Evidence that could destroy 5 different families. Financial records that proved money laundering through a dozen legitimate businesses. And, most importantly, a complete organizational chart showing every person in Lorenzo Moretti's empire, their roles, their weaknesses, their secrets. She'd photographed everything with her iPad. She'd been in and out in 8 minutes. She'd returned the key to her father's bathroom counter before the shower stopped running. And because Isabella was 9 years old and understood theater better than most adults, she'd left something behind. Not accidentally. Very deliberately. A single purple hair ribbon. Her signature accessory. Lying in the safe, impossible to miss when her father opened it next. She'd wanted him to know. Needed him to know. Because the point wasn't just to steal from him. The point was to prove she could. And proving it required him eventually discovering exactly who had been outsmarting him for 6 months. The discovery came 2 days later. Lorenzo had opened the safe to retrieve documents for a meeting with the Calabrese family. He'd input the combination, used his key, pressed his thumb to the biometric scanner. The safe had clicked open. And there, lying on top of his most sensitive files, was a purple ribbon. Isabella's ribbon. She'd known the exact moment he'd found it because she'd heard the roar from 3 floors away.
Marco.
Vito, get up here now. She'd been in her room, supposedly doing homework, when her uncle Marco had knocked on her door. His face had been pale, carefully neutral. Bella, your father wants to see you in his office. Is everything okay? She'd made her eyes wide, innocent, concerned. Just come with me, sweetheart. The walk to her father's office had been the longest of her life. Not because she was scared. She'd planned for this moment, had rehearsed it in her head 100 times. But because this was it. The moment where everything she'd built would either pay off or collapse. Her father's office was full of men when she entered. Her uncle Marco. Vito. 3 soldiers she recognized. Her brother Junior. All of them looking at her with expressions ranging from confusion to concern to something that might have been fear. Lorenzo sat behind his desk, and for the first time in her life, Isabella saw her father look truly shaken. The purple ribbon lay on his desk, accusatory and impossible. Isabella. His voice was carefully controlled. Can you explain to me how your ribbon ended up in my private safe? She'd planned for this moment. Had considered a dozen different approaches. Deny everything and force him to prove it. Impossible when she'd left no other evidence. Confess and beg forgiveness. Weak and unsatisfying. Play dumb and claim someone was framing her, cowardly and beneath her. Instead, she did what she'd planned from the beginning. She met her father's eyes and smiled. Not a child's smile. A predator's smile. And she said the words that would change everything. Because I wanted you to know it was me, Daddy. The room went absolutely silent. Lorenzo stared at his daughter like he'd never seen her before. You wanted me to know? Yes. Isabella walked calmly to one of the leather chairs in front of his desk, climbed up into it, and sat with her hands folded in her lap, perfectly composed. I left the ribbon on purpose. It wasn't a mistake. None of it was a mistake. None of what, exactly? Lorenzo's voice was dangerously quiet. All of it. The Castellano files, 6 months ago. The offshore account information, 3 months ago. The judge's blackmail material. The police peril. The organizational chart. Everything I've taken from you over the last 6 months. All calculated. All planned. All executed perfectly.
She paused.
Well, almost perfectly. I let you catch me at the end because I wanted you to know. Vito had his hand on his gun. Her Uncle Marco looked like he might be sick. Junior's face had gone completely blank with shock. But Lorenzo just stared at his 9-year-old daughter, and Isabella watched him do the math. Watched him realize that every theft, every breach, every moment he'd suspected a mole within his organization, it had been her. The child he kissed goodnight. The daughter he thought needed protecting from his world. Why? The single word came out hoarse. Because you are never going to take me seriously. Isabella kept her voice calm, matter of fact, like she was explaining a school project. I heard you tell Junior I was delicate, that I needed to be protected, that I was something to marry off for political advantage. You were training him to be your heir, while treating me like a princess in a tower who needed guarding. You're 9 years old, and I've been stealing your most sensitive intelligence for 6 months while you suspected everyone except me. I hacked your secure servers. I bypassed your biometric locks. I cloned your personal key. I documented every theft in a notebook hidden in my room. I've been 3 steps ahead of you and your entire organization because you couldn't conceive that your innocent little daughter might be smarter than your security protocols. Lorenzo's hands gripped the edge of his desk. Where are the files now? Safe. Encrypted. Backed up in 3 locations you'll never find. And before you threaten me or try to force me to return them, Isabella leaned forward slightly. Understand that if anything happens to me, if I don't check in at specific intervals, everything I've stolen goes to the FBI, the press, and every rival family in Chicago. Automatically. I built a dead man switch when I was 8.5. It's foolproof. Before we continue, drop a comment telling me if you think Isabella is a genius or if she's gone too far. Hit that like button if you're impressed by her strategic thinking, and make sure you're subscribed because the next part is where her father has to make an impossible choice. Turn on those notifications. The room remained frozen. Isabella could see her father processing, calculating, trying to understand how his world had just been turned completely upside down by a child who should be worried about multiplication tables and playground politics. You said you left the ribbon because you wanted me to know. Lorenzo's voice was strained. Why would you want me to know? If you're so smart, why not just keep stealing until you had everything? Because I don't want everything, Daddy. Isabella finally let some emotion show, not fear or regret, but frustration that had been building for years. I want what Junior has. I want to be taken seriously. I want to be trained as your heir. I want you to look at me and see someone capable instead of something fragile. You're 9. Junior was 6 when you started teaching him about territory. 8 when you let him sit in on meetings. 12 when you explained how the business actually works. You've been training him his whole life because he's male and I'm not. But I've taught myself everything he knows and more. I've proven I can think strategically. I've proven I can execute plans under pressure. I've proven I can outthink your security, your lieutenants, and you. What else do I need to prove? Lorenzo stood abruptly, pacing to the window. The men in the room remained silent, waiting. Isabella watched her father's reflection in the glass, watched him struggle with reality reshaping itself. You stole from me, he said finally. From your own father. You put the entire organization at risk. Those files in the wrong hands could start a war. But they're not in the wrong hands. They're in my hands. And I'm offering you a deal. Isabella slid down from the chair, walked to stand beside her father at the window. She was small enough that the top of her head barely reached his elbow. I return everything I stole. The files, the evidence, the intelligence. All of it. In exchange, you train me. Really train me. The way you've been training Junior. You teach me the business. You let me prove myself over and over until even you can't deny that I'm capable. And if I say no, then I keep the files as insurance. I continue doing exactly what I want while you continue underestimating me. And when I'm 18, I'll leave and start my own operation using everything I've learned from watching you. You'll have created your own competition because you couldn't accept that your daughter is every bit as capable as your son. Lorenzo turned to look at her then, really look at her, and Isabella held his gaze without flinching. She'd prepared for this moment, had known that the key to negotiating with her father was showing strength, not vulnerability. He respected strength. He protected vulnerability. She didn't want protection anymore. "You're 9 years old," he repeated, but it sounded less like a statement and more like he was trying to convince himself. "I'm 9 years old, and I've been running a 6-month intelligence operation against one of Chicago's most powerful criminal organizations without being detected until I chose to reveal myself. Age is just a number, Daddy. Capability is what matters. And I've proven mine." Marco cleared his throat. "Lorenzo, we should discuss this privately."
No.
Isabella cut him off, her voice sharp. "This isn't a family discussion. This is a business negotiation. I'm offering a fair trade. Intelligence for training. You get back everything I took. I get the opportunity I've earned. Everyone wins." "You put yourself in danger," Lorenzo said, and there was pain in his voice now. "If anyone had caught you, if anything had gone wrong. But nothing went wrong. Because I'm good at this.
I'm careful. I'm smart.
I'm exactly the kind of asset you'd value if I was anyone else's daughter." She softened her voice slightly. "I miss Mom too, Daddy. I know you want to protect me because you couldn't protect her. But wrapping me in bubble wrap and pretending I'm delicate doesn't honor her memory. She was strong. She was smart. She would have wanted you to see those same qualities in me instead of trying to hide me away." That hit. Isabella saw her father's composure crack slightly, saw the grief he kept buried surface for just a moment. "Your mother would be horrified by this conversation," Lorenzo said roughly. "Maybe. Or maybe she'd be proud that I refused to be sidelined because of my gender. You always said she was fierce. That she never backed down. That she was the only person who could stand up to you." Isabella paused. "I'm her daughter too, Daddy. Not just yours. And she taught me to fight for what I deserve." Lorenzo looked at Vito, at Marco, at the other men in the room. "Everyone out. Except Junior. He stays." The room cleared quickly. When the door closed, leaving just Lorenzo, Isabella, and Junior, the dynamic shifted. They were family now, not boss and subordinates. Lorenzo sat back down at his desk. "Junior, your sister just confessed to systematically stealing from us for 6 months. What do you think we should do about it?" Junior had been silent through the entire confrontation, and Isabella watched him carefully. Her brother had always been kind to her, protective, but also dismissive. Like she was a pet he was fond of, but didn't take seriously. "I think..." Junior started, then stopped. Started again. "I think I'm impressed. And terrified. And I think if anyone else had done this, we'd kill them. But she's family. And she's apparently way smarter than we gave her credit for." "That's not an answer. The answer is we train her." Junior met his father's eyes. "Because if we don't, she'll be a liability. She already knows too much. She's already proven she can operate against us successfully. Better to have her as an ally than risk her becoming an enemy when she's older and even more capable." Isabella felt a flutter of surprise. She'd expected Junior to be angry, to feel threatened by her trying to claim part of his inheritance. Instead, he seemed almost relieved. "You're okay with this?" Lorenzo asked his son. "Honestly?
Yeah.
I've been feeling the pressure of being the only heir. If Bella is serious about this, if she's really as capable as she just demonstrated..." Junior looked at his sister with new respect. "Then having her as a partner instead of dead weight I have to protect sounds pretty good." "Dead weight," Isabella muttered. "You know what I mean. Dad's been treating you like you're made of glass. We all have. But you just proved you're made of steel. So yeah, train her. Test her. If she's really this good, we need her on our side." Lorenzo rubbed his face with both hands. "You're both insane. She's 9 years old. She should be worried about school dances and which boy to have a crush on, not corporate espionage and organizational strategy. With all due respect, Daddy, I've never been a normal 9-year-old. Isabella climbed back into her chair. "And you know it. You've known it since I started reading at 3 and doing complex math at 5. You've known it since I taught myself to code at 7. You've just been pretending I was normal because it was easier than accepting what I actually am. And what are you, exactly? Your daughter. And your heir. Just like Junior. She folded her hands in her lap. So, do we have a deal? I return everything. You train me. We move forward as a family instead of me having to prove myself by working against you. The silence stretched. Isabella counted her heartbeats, keeping her face calm despite the anxiety churning in her stomach. This was the moment. Either her father would accept that she'd outmaneuvered him and earned her place, or he'd reject her and she'd have to execute Plan B. She really hoped it wouldn't come to Plan B. 6 months, Lorenzo said finally. You've been stealing from me for 6 months, and I never suspected. Not once. Not once. You made me suspect my own people. Question loyalties that have been solid for decades. You put operational security at risk. You violated every trust I've ever placed in you. Yes. And you did it all to prove a point. To prove my capability, Isabella corrected. The point is just how I'm delivering the message. Lorenzo looked at his son. You're really okay with this? With your little sister potentially taking half of what should be yours. I'm okay with having a brilliant partner who just demonstrated she can think circles around our security protocols. If she's this good at 9, Junior shrugged. Imagine what she'll be capable of at 25. I'd rather have her with us than against us. Exactly, Isabella said. Lorenzo stood again, walked to a safe, and pulled out a folder. He placed it on the desk in front of Isabella. Before I agree to anything, I need to know everything. Every theft, every method, every detail of how you did it. Complete disclosure. Of course. Isabella had prepared for this too. She pulled a small USB drive from her pocket. She'd been carrying it for 2 days, waiting for this conversation. This contains a complete log of every operation. Dates, times, methods, files taken, storage locations. Everything you need to understand exactly how I breached your security. Lorenzo took the drive, studied it, then studied his daughter. You're really not afraid of me right now, are you? I'm terrified, Isabella admitted. But I'm more afraid of spending the rest of my life being treated like I'm incapable when I know I'm not. So I'm choosing to be brave instead of safe. Something shifted in Lorenzo's face. For the first time since the ribbon had been discovered, he looked at his daughter with something other than shock or confusion. He looked at her with recognition. You're just like her, he said quietly. Your mother. She used to say the same thing, that she'd rather be brave than safe. I know. I remember. Lorenzo sat back down heavily.
Fine.
You want to be trained? I'll train you. But understand something, Isabella. This isn't going to be easy. I'm not going to go soft on you because you're 9 or because you're my daughter. If you want to be treated like an heir, you'll be held to the same standards as Junior. That means studying when other kids are playing, training when others are sleeping, learning to make hard decisions that will haunt you. This life isn't glamorous. It's brutal. And once you're in, there's no going back to being a normal child. I was never going to be a normal child anyway, Isabella said. At least this way, I'm a useful, abnormal child. Despite everything, Lorenzo laughed. It was sharp and slightly bitter, but it was a laugh. God help me.
Fine.
We have a deal. You return everything you stole. I train you. We see if you're really as capable as you think you are. I am. We'll see. He extended his hand across the desk. Shake on it. Isabella hopped down from the chair, walked around the desk, and shook her father's hand solemnly. His hand engulfed hers, rough and scarred and powerful. She squeezed as firmly as her small hand could manage. Deal, she said. Deal, Lorenzo agreed. Then he pulled her into a hug, sudden and fierce, and Isabella felt him trembling slightly. You terrified me, baby girl. When I realized it was you, when I understood what you'd been doing. I know. I'm sorry for scaring you. But I'm not sorry for proving myself. I know. He pulled back, hands on her shoulders, looking at her with new eyes. Your mother would be so proud. And so absolutely furious. Probably both at the same time. Sounds like Mom, Sounds like you. Lorenzo released her, his composure returning. Okay. First lesson starts tomorrow. 5 a.m. We're going to review every security protocol you breached and figure out how to fix them so nobody else can do what you did. Already have a list of recommendations, Isabella said. Of course you do. Junior stood, moving to stand beside his sister. For what it's worth, Bella, that was the most badass thing I've ever seen. I'm actually kind of glad I won't be doing this alone anymore. Thanks, Junior. Though if you ever steal from me personally, I'm telling Dad to ground you until you're 30. Fair. The three of them stood there for a moment, family reconfiguring itself, power dynamics shifting, the future suddenly looking very different than anyone had planned. Then Lorenzo's phone rang. He glanced at it, his expression shifting to business mode. I need to take this. Isabella, go back to your room. Return everything you stole to this drive. He handed her an encrypted external drive. By tonight. Tomorrow, we start your real education. Yes, Daddy. Isabella took the drive, started for the door, then paused. Thank you. For listening. For seeing me. Thank you for not destroying us all to prove your point, Lorenzo said dryly. Now go. And, Isabella? Yes. That dead man switch you mentioned. Does it really exist? She smiled. What do you think? I think you're too smart to bluff about something that important. Then you have your answer. She left, closing the door behind her, and headed for her room with a lightness in her step she hadn't felt in months. She'd done it. She'd proven herself. She'd earned her place. And now the real work could begin. That evening, Isabella sat at her desk transferring files back to her father's encrypted drive. Every piece of intelligence she'd stolen over 6 months returned as promised. She worked methodically, double-checking each transfer, making sure nothing was corrupted or missing. When she was finished, she sat back and looked at her teddy bear hiding place. The external drive was empty now, its secrets returned. But she'd learned so much in the process. About herself, about her capabilities, about how to think strategically and execute precisely. She pulled out her notebook, the one with all her plans and check marks and observations, and flipped to a fresh page. Wrote at the top, Phase 2, Real Training. Then she heard footsteps in the hallway. Her father's footsteps, purposeful and quick. The knock came a moment later.
Come in.
Lorenzo entered, his face grave. He was carrying a folder. A different folder than before. The files are all transferred, Isabella said, gesturing to the drive on her desk. Everything you asked for. I know. I've been monitoring the transfer. Lorenzo sat on the edge of her bed, and something in his expression made Isabella's instincts ping. This wasn't a proud father coming to check on his daughter. This was a Mafia boss coming to deliver difficult information. What's wrong? She asked. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. More honest than you've been about anything else. He opened the folder, pulled out a single piece of paper, and handed it to her. Did you steal this file? Isabella looked at the paper. It was a printout of a file index. Her breath caught. It was the file on Marco. Her uncle Marco. Her father's brother and second in command. The file she'd stolen but hadn't mentioned during her confession. The file she'd kept separate from everything else because it was different. Because it wasn't just intelligence or blackmail or financial records. It was evidence of a conspiracy. Of her uncle planning to orchestrate a coup. Of him building alliances with rival families. Of him systematically undermining her father's authority while pretending to be his most loyal supporter. It was the ace she'd kept hidden. The one card she'd held back. Because if her father had accepted her deal, she could return it as a gesture of good faith. But if he'd rejected her, she'd need leverage. She'd need something to protect herself. And now he knew. How did you? She started. I told you I'd be monitoring the transfers. I compared what you returned against my access logs. Everything you stole is accounted for. Except this file. It was accessed the same night as the others, downloaded at the same time, but it's not in what you returned to me. Lorenzo's voice was very quiet. So I'll ask again. Did you steal this file? Isabella looked at her father. At the test in his eyes. At the choice being offered. She could lie, deny everything, claim the access logs were wrong. But that would mean starting this new relationship with dishonesty. It would mean proving she couldn't be trusted even after they'd made their deal. Or she could tell the truth, admit she'd held back, explain why, and face whatever consequences came from that honesty. She chose truth.
Yes.
I took it. I kept it separate because it's different from everything else. It's not just intelligence.
It's
evidence that my brother is planning to kill me and take over the family. Lorenzo's voice was flat, emotionless, which somehow made it more terrible. Yes. How long have you known? 6 months. I found it during my first breach. I've been watching him since then, documenting everything, building the case. I kept it separate because I wasn't sure what to do with it. You're not supposed to read it yet. You're not ready. I'm not ready. Lorenzo laughed, but there was no humor in it. My 9-year-old daughter decided I'm not ready to know my own brother wants me dead. You love him. You trust him. Finding out he's been planning your death for 2 years would destroy you. I was going to tell you eventually when the timing was right, when you had other alliances in place to replace him, when you were emotionally prepared for the betrayal. Isabella met her father's eyes. I was trying to protect you. The silence stretched between them. Lorenzo stared at his daughter, and Isabella watched him process this new layer of her manipulation. She hadn't just stolen to prove herself. She'd been conducting a larger operation. She'd been managing information, controlling what her father knew and when he knew it, making strategic decisions about his own intelligence. She'd been treating him like an asset to manage, not a father to obey. You were going to tell me eventually, Lorenzo repeated. When you decided I was ready. Yes. You're 9 years old, and you were making strategic decisions about managing my emotional state and my organizational security. Yes. God. Lorenzo put his head in his hands. What have I raised? Someone who thinks ahead. Someone who plans for contingencies. Someone who protects the people she loves even when they don't know they need protecting. Isabella stood, moved to sit beside her father on the bed. I didn't tell you about the Marco file during my confession because I wasn't sure you'd accept my deal. If you'd rejected me, I'd need leverage to protect myself. That file was my insurance. But now that we have a deal, now that you've agreed to train me. She pulled her phone from her pocket, navigated to her encrypted cloud storage, and downloaded a file. Here. Everything I have on Uncle Marco. Every meeting, every conversation, every piece of evidence showing exactly what he's been planning. It's yours. Lorenzo took the phone, scrolled through the file, his face draining of color as he read. When he looked up at his daughter, there was something like awe mixed with horror in his expression. This is comprehensive. Dates, times, witnesses. You've built an entire case.
I'm feral.
Isabella. He set the phone down. I need you to understand something. What you just gave me, this information will start a war. My brother is my second in command. Half the organization is loyal to him. If I move against him based on this evidence, people will die. A lot of people. And it will tear our family apart. I know. And you are prepared to carry this burden alone? To make decisions about when and how to reveal this.
Someone had to.
You couldn't see it because you loved him too much. Junior couldn't see it because he's still learning. So I carried it. Because that's what you do when you're capable and everyone else is blind. She paused. But I'm giving it to you now because we're partners. Because you accepted me as your heir. And partners don't keep secrets that could destroy each other. Lorenzo pulled his daughter into another hug, this one longer, tighter. When he spoke, his voice was rough. You scare me, baby girl. You're 9 years old, and you think like a 40-year-old strategist. You manipulate situations like someone who's been doing this for decades. You carry burdens that would break most adults. And I don't know if I'm proud or terrified or both. Both is okay, Isabella said into his shoulder. I'm both about me too sometimes. He laughed, genuine this time. Fair enough. He released her, stood, picked up his phone with the Marco evidence. I need to think about this. About how to handle it. About what moves to make. He shook his head. This changes everything. I know. That's why I held on to it. I wanted you to be ready. I'm not sure anyone could be ready for this. Lorenzo moved to the door, then paused. Tomorrow, 5 a.m. Training starts. But tonight, he looked back at his daughter. Tonight I need you to be a 9-year-old, just for a few hours. Watch a movie. Play with your toys. Do something that isn't strategic thinking or manipulation or carrying adult burdens. Can you do that for me? I can try.
Good.
He started to leave, then stopped again. And Isabella? Thank you. For the truth. For protecting me even when I didn't know I needed it. For being brave enough to give me information that could have been your leverage forever. His voice cracked slightly. That's the kind of loyalty I've been looking for my whole life. From my own daughter, who I wasn't even seeing clearly. You see me now, Daddy. That's what matters. After he left, Isabella sat alone in her room, feeling the weight of everything that had just happened. She'd achieved what she set out to achieve. She'd proven herself, earned her place, secured her position as heir alongside Junior. But she'd also just given her father evidence that would tear their family apart. Had handed him information that would force him to move against his own brother. Had started a chain of events that would end in violence and betrayal and pain. She pulled out her notebook and made a new entry. Not in the regular pages where she planned operations. In the back, where she kept her private thoughts. Note to self: power has a cost. Proving yourself means people get hurt. Being capable means carrying burdens that hurt to carry. Mom understood this. Daddy is learning it. I'm learning it too. Is it worth it? I don't know yet. Ask me again in 10 years. She closed the notebook, put it away, and did what her father had asked. She put on her favorite movie, the one with the ice princess, and let herself be a 9-year-old girl for a few hours. Tomorrow she'd be an heir in training. But tonight, she could just be Isabella. Smart, scared, proud, and uncertain all at once. And somewhere in the house, her father was reading evidence that would change everything. Evidence she'd given him. Evidence that would prove once and for all that she wasn't delicate or innocent or something to be protected. She was dangerous. And brilliant. And exactly the kind of heir a mafia boss needed, even if that mafia boss hadn't known it until his daughter had stolen from him to prove it. The purple ribbon lay on her desk where she'd left it after her father had returned it to her. Her signature. Her calling card. Her declaration that Isabella Moretti was done being invisible. She picked it up, tied it carefully in her hair, and smiled at her reflection. Let the real games begin. If this story made your heart race with the brilliance of a 9-year-old outsmarting her mafia boss father, smash that like button. Drop a comment telling me what you think Isabella should do about Uncle Marco's conspiracy. Should she have kept it secret, or was giving it to her father the right move? And subscribe immediately, because part 2 is coming, and you need to see what happens when a 9-year-old girl becomes a genuine player in Chicago's deadliest game. Hit that notification bell because trust me, you don't want to miss how this family war unfolds and whether Isabella's intelligence is enough to survive what's coming next. Until then, remember, the most dangerous underestimation is assuming someone is harmless because they're young. Isabella just proved that brilliance has no age limit, and the people who dismiss children as incapable are the same people who get outsmarted by them.